Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to hear a little bit more about what micro internships are, how you can potentially get started with using micro internships with your various student support resources. My name is Kristen Schrader. It is my privilege to lead the partnership team here at Parker Dewey. And before we get officially rolling here, I would like to turn the table and hear a little bit about those of you who joined us today. So, got a couple of quick questions just to get a little bit of extra context. So, if you could take a moment and share a little bit about who you are. Do you primarily serve students, alumni, or employers, or maybe a combination of folks? So, you could quickly answer that. Thank you for those of you who already have. All right, so it looks like it's a lot of folks focused on employers, some that wear lots of different hats. So appreciate knowing that. It helps me to kind of customize and provide a little bit of extra context. Speaking of context, both I and my entire team have worked in career services before. My career has primarily been that combination of two or more. My most recent higher ed experience was at the University of Maryland Global Campus, so a lot of non-traditional students, students who were working, going to school and just couldn't drop everything and do an internship. And that's where I heard about Parker Dewey. This was probably about 6 years ago now, and where it really resonated with me in this idea of how can students get experience to launch their career, and especially when they're also juggling the bazillion other priorities that they have going on: work, school, mortgage, just family obligations, and whatever else might be involved. So, again, thank you for those of you for sharing a little bit about that. I have one other quick poll to ask you, and that is love to understand again, who's in the room, your level of awareness or engagement with Parker Dewey. So are you an existing partner, maybe a newer point of contact, just need a little bit of a refresh of what this is all about? Great. Maybe you're already interested and want to learn a little bit more, but just know a little bit? Great. Or if you just don't know much and again, just need a bit of a fresh start for all of this. Again, really excited to welcome you today. So, all right, it's a pretty even split. So some of you are existing partners, some of you are a little bit of already aware, and some of you are brand new. So again, really appreciate, and I will stop asking you questions. So thank you for taking a few minutes to answer those. So again, if you do have to hop early, not a problem. Like most webinars, we're all familiar with this at this point, but this is recorded. But feel free, please utilize the chat as we go through, because I do want to make this as useful for you as possible. We're recording this in April. Yes, this will be recorded, and you can use and listen to this later on or share it with a colleague. But know that, I know that it's a busy time of the year, no matter what time of the year it is. So hopefully you've mostly wrapped up those career events, but I know there's probably still a few, more than a few things on the list before you can completely wrap up the academic year. So appreciate this chance to spend a few minutes together. And so that said, where are we headed? Well, first and foremost, I want to give you an overview. So those of you who are brand new to this or are looking for a refresh, that's where we're going to start. We'll show you how the Parker Dewey platform works for students and for companies. But then the last portion of our conversation will focus on you in terms of whether you work for a university, maybe you work for a nonprofit organization and are looking to perhaps bring micro internships to serve your students or other stakeholders. And I want to share with you some case studies. How do schools or nonprofit organizations do this and do it well and effectively? And so you'll hear directly from some of the organizations and schools that have been most successful at implementing these micro internship programs. But to start us off, I want to introduce you to a few students, because at the core, I would imagine most of us go into higher ed because we're interested and passionate about folks who are early in their careers. Folks like the five that you see here that represent but are certainly not inclusive of the students that you're working with day in and day out, and who face various challenges to help them launch their career. Maybe they're getting filtered out because of a GPA that took a hit early on in their academic journey. Maybe they're a student athlete and just can't have the time to do a traditional internship. Maybe they're juggling work, school, family obligations, can't afford to do something that's unpaid. Maybe they just have so many different options that they just don't know where to turn. Even if they are in, like in the case of Darren, a pre-professional type of academic program. In Darren's case, he was a marketing major. Or maybe they're students like Noelle, who go to a career fair and just feel really overwhelmed. And first gen student, he just didn't really know how to navigate this whole, what do I do post college? It was for students like this and the thousands upon thousands of others that we work with day in and day out that micro-internships were created. But what's nice about this model is it doesn't just serve the students. Certainly it does, but there's also another side, another stakeholder that is equally important to consider, because those of you, and especially those of you on the call that indicated that your primary role is working with employers, you probably have heard some of these different challenges that these organizations have said, such as, yeah, I'm trying to reach students as early as possible in their academic year. We're hearing from companies that say first and second year students, those are who I want to meet. Okay, but how do you engage them? Or students don't really think of me in terms of a place to launch their career. That's what Staples told us. And they used micro-internships not for their brick and mortar stores, but rather to introduce students to their corporate roles. Or some companies that students may not be familiar with at all, like Xylem. You're forgiven if you had never heard of this multi-billion-dollar water technology company. I know I certainly hadn't, but they are a massive organization doing some really, really interesting and important work at bringing water, fresh water, to populations around the world. Kind of hard to not get behind a mission like that, but they were having trouble because students just don't know who they are. Or even students or companies like Microsoft or Pepsi, where students do know who they are, but maybe don't think of launching their career. In the case of Microsoft, you think of it for IT. Microsoft used micro-internships for their HR and corporate social responsibility types of roles. So a bit outside of what one would particularly expect when they're launching their career. And so to address both students and companies, that's where this micro-internship was created. In Parker Dewey, we founded the micro-internship concept about 8 years ago. And the whole purpose of our organization is to try to create more equitable opportunities for students to go from college to career, and for companies to find talent that is going to stick, that is going to be a great addition to their team. We are very, very focused on creating opportunities that are both accessible and as equitable as we possibly can. And you're going to see that in how we define a micro-internship and just in various ways that we do business and operate. We're honored to partner with hundreds of colleges and universities, every single one of which came to us through word of mouth. Meaning we don't do any marketing to schools or nonprofits. We are honored, happy, thrilled to support those of you who are partners or who are looking to build and do more. But again, whether or not you want to partner with us, and we'll talk about that, but whether or not you want to, we are honored and happy to serve your students. And we'll talk again more about that in a moment as well. And our platforms connected thousands of students and recent grads through these short-term paid projects with organizations as small as that one-person startup to the multinational Fortune 100 type companies, nonprofits, government agencies, the full spectrum of organizations. And by the way, if you're curious, Parker and Dewey, the name is intentional, stands for Francis Parker and John Dewey. And those of you who have a background in higher ed, went to graduate school for that, like I did, you might recognize those names as they were core to the core initial researchers in the field of experiential education, and really brought this idea of learn by doing to light about 100 or so years ago. So what is a micro-internship? Well, how we define it is short-term paid professional projects completed by college students or recent grads or anyone who is early in their career. They're doing it on behalf of busy professionals. And there's a lot of pieces to that definition, so I'll dissect that more in a moment. You also see those 6 different examples of some common projects that we see posted day in and day out as micro-internships. This is certainly not a comprehensive list, but hopefully gives you some ideas of the types of projects that we regularly see. So just to dissect that definition, short term, generally these projects are between 10 and 40 hours in total that it takes the student to complete. And they're posted just in time. So if you have students, for example, who are looking for summer types of projects, great, but it's too early to be looking on Parker Dewey. The projects that are posted right now are going to be kicked off within the next few days to few weeks. And then new projects will be posted tomorrow and the next day and so on. It's very much just in time. What is immediately on somebody's to-do list? They are also all paid and paid fairly. Why? Because we just think that's the right thing to do. Going back to our mission, our goal is to make these opportunities as accessible and equitable as possible. And we just fundamentally don't believe that an opportunity is accessible if you don't pay students for doing the real work. And by the way, this is real work. They are posted by folks like us. We have higher education institution folks posting micro-internships regularly. For those things that are on your to-do list right now that maybe you're not going to get done today or tomorrow or the next day, post it as a micro-internship. The students can do the legwork, they get that paid professional experience, and you can focus on something else. And we'll talk again how that all works shortly. They're also designed to be a flexible on-demand resource that are usually completed remotely. Can they be in person? Sure. But we found that even before the pandemic, most organizations prefer to execute micro-internships and work with students remotely. It makes the logistics easier. When we are asked by companies, should they make it remote or in person, we always recommend remote whenever possible, just so that it is as accessible to students as possible, even if they don't have transportation or what have you. Now, going back to the payment, what you'll see when posting the project is that it clearly states how much the student will make, and then Parker, which is 90% of the total project cost. Parker Dewey does retain 10% of the total amount that the organization pays, and that covers our costs of paying the student, having the student on our books, because yes, the students are working as independent contractors of Parker Dewey. So we provide them with the appropriate 1099, and we handle all of that payment and other infrastructure. But as far as the companies go, there is no cost to post. They are only invoiced once they select a student or however many students that they want to work with. For the student, they will see what they'll receive if they're selected. So there's no surprise to the student how much they'll be paid if they're selected for that micro-internship. And so we see for students and for companies, sometimes they'll just do one project, they'll just post one. And for companies, it might be, I get that item on the to-do list, great, I want to get it done. But for more and more organizations, they're using this as an additional way to get to know your students, to identify students who are a good fit for longer term roles, who want to hire these students, potentially, if they're a good fit, for that internship or that full-time role. So going back to some of those pain points of a company, if you have a company that's saying, hey, I want to meet your students as early in their academic career as possible, this is a great resource for them. They can work with a student on that short-term project. And we see first-year students, we've even seen students complete micro-internships before they've even matriculated. They heard about it during orientation. And so they do very, very well at projects that require attention to detail or strong written communication skills, things along those lines. And then we see projects that are far more sophisticated. So there's a really, really broad spectrum. Now, for those companies that want to hire the students, fantastic. That is our ultimate goal. Not that it always happens, but we certainly don't want to get in the way because, again, that is our mission, is to create equitable opportunities for students to launch their careers. And so if companies want to hire the students, we don't charge them a dime. That is a big differentiator from how we operate versus other gig platforms. And as I like to tell students or even schools, if a student wants to be a freelancer, fantastic, that's great if they want to do that. But Parker Dewey is designed for that early career stage of one's professional journey. And once a student has a year or more of experience doing what they really want to do post-graduation, great. If you want to be a freelancer, you probably should look elsewhere. We really want this to be that stepping stone for students. And that's why we don't charge any sort of fee, finder's fee or otherwise, for the student to get hired on long-term. Nothing wrong with either. It's just a different philosophy and a different goal for how our platform is set up. And that's where it's really designed to be aligned and complementary to campus recruiting. For those organizations that come to campus recruit, nobody can go to every career fair. And so this becomes another opportunity for them to engage students across the spectrum of higher ed. So I've just shared a lot. Let me dissect a lot of different things. Top of mind, though, is probably cost. And good news here for your students, they already have access. Think of us a bit like LinkedIn, and I'll talk more about that shortly. But the platform is free and open to your students. And I can pretty much guarantee you probably have had at least one student create an account and probably apply to a micro-internship, even if you haven't promoted micro-internships to them. But partnership is also at no cost to your organization or school. And again, we'll talk more about what those details entail. And this goes back, again, to our mission of trying to make this as accessible to all as we possibly can. So how does it all work? Well, for students, 3 quick, simple steps. Create a profile, apply to the projects that interest them, and if they're selected, complete the project. And part of the reason why this is so simple is, again, we recognize students are busy. They have a lot of different demands and distractions and so on. And so creating that profile takes less than 10 minutes. We do not use single sign-on or require any sort of IT integration. A way to think of us is similar to LinkedIn. So you can promote us in a very similar way to say, hey, if you're looking for short-term project-based experience, check out Parker Dewey. And again, they create their own account with whatever email address that they want, etc. Behind the scenes, Parker Dewey is handling the vetting of the projects, and our 2 primary criteria is that project paid and paid fairly, and is it professional? So we don't see things, for example, where it's walk my dog, babysit my kids. Nothing wrong with those experiences. However, if students are looking for that, they should look elsewhere. We are very focused on those projects that are designed similar to what students would do in an internship or that first job after college, very early administrative types of projects, research types of projects, data cleansing, writing, things along those lines tend to be really great micro-internships that we see regularly. Our role also is handling all of that administration. So the students are paid by Parker Dewey. We handle the legal, the HR, all that good stuff. That makes it easier for the students and provides a lot of protections for them. One way I like to think of it is even if the company hasn't paid us, we still pay the student. We also aggregate however much that they've received come tax time. So whether they do one project or like many students, they may do multiple. And so they can, again, not have to keep track of all of this IT, HR, and tax stuff. It's all aggregated for them. So they'll receive the appropriate tax forms come January of the year following when they did the work. And the last level of support is that we've learned a thing or two, having created micro-internships about 8 years ago. And so we'll send the students various best practices on how to most effectively communicate and work with their project supervisor. We'll check in with them along the way, and we'll also provide that same support for the organization. So just to give you a little bit more of a visual, most of the students do hear about micro-internships from their school. And so we'll, for partner institutions, set up a landing page similar to what you see with Colorado State. You certainly are welcome to create an account if you like as well. And then they complete a brief profile. Again, takes 5-10 minutes to complete in total. They can complete as much or a little of it as they like. There are sections that are required, but very few are. They do affiliate with one school, but they do not have to upload a resume. So if you have a first-year student that maybe they're just not quite ready, they don't have their resume to get, that's okay. They can still use micro-internships and apply to these opportunities. Speaking of which, once they've created their account, that's when they'll see the projects that are available and of interest, that they are available to them. Now, there's 2 different sections of projects. There may be a section that when you first log in called featured, and then there's always all open micro-internships. What does that mean? Well, organizations, when posting micro-internships, can say that they only want students from certain schools, or in the case of nonprofit organizations, students from your organization to see that project. And so those projects will appear first under a featured projects heading. In those projects, if you have students that are seeing those, you may want to recommend that they focus on those projects first because they're not open to everybody. And so the pool of students that they'll be competing against is significantly smaller than those that are open to everybody. But there's always projects open to all. We encourage companies whenever possible to post these opportunities as open to all. And there's new opportunities posted regularly. One other word about these projects is that the company might be looking for one student, but they may also be hiring 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 50, 100 students for each posting. And so every project is different. Every project has different needs and requirements. But we regularly see projects where it might be, say, a social media type of project. And they may say to one student, okay, you focus on Instagram, you focus on Facebook, and you focus on Twitter or X or whatever. So those are one example. Or you focus on content for the next 3 months, and then you focus on the next 3 months after that. Again, just to give you a quick example. For whatever it is, they can click details, they read more about it, they'll see how much they'll be paid, the start date, the due date, the description of the company and the project itself. And if the student's interested, they click apply. And that's when they're led to answering at least one short answer application question. There's always at least one question. That first question is this, and the standard question is essentially, why should we pick you? And we find that this serves both as the application, but also it's kind of like an interview because most companies do not do interviews for micro-internships. It's very easy, though, as you can see from this example, for a company to distinguish between a student who put forth the effort and a student who might need to go visit your office and get some coaching. These are two real examples. Emma and Wyatt, they applied to the exact same micro-internship. Why should we select you for this opportunity? Well, the company was a medical device organization recruiting for an open role in sales, and specifically recruiting for their management training program, rotational development program in sales. And it said that on the posting. Well, if you read Emma's response, I've had a passion for medical device sales ever since I first found out about it. She clearly read the description, she researched the company, she has a very compelling reason for why this particular project is of interest to her. Now, Wyatt, on the other hand, nothing inherently bad about his answer per se. It wasn't as detailed, certainly, but there's a typo. And he didn't have his resume in his profile. And there's some details and points that were just not nearly as strong as Emma's. And what happened to these students? Well, no surprise, Emma was selected, Wyatt wasn't, but Emma went on and got hired by this company and received that full-time offer and still is working for the organization to this day. Wyatt missed out on everything afterwards because, again, just didn't put the best foot forward on that initial response to this application. And by the way, when you receive these slides later on, you certainly are welcome to check out these different resources. And we have lots of links embedded within this presentation where you can see, in the case here, some additional examples of what a student said who was selected for the project and somebody who applied for the same micro-internship and where their answers fell short. So feel free to use these resources. For those of you who are student-facing, we find that micro-internships become a really great catalyst for coming to visit your office. Because hopefully, if the students are quite ready professionally, if they're going to make a mistake, they're going to make it here, hopefully, so that they can then learn from it and then put their best foot forward for the next time that they apply, whether it be to another micro-internship or when the stakes get higher to that internship or even full-time opportunity. We want this to be an opportunity for them to learn, because at the end of the day, they are students. And we hope that this will be a teachable moment for them. So once the student is selected, what happens? Well, work gets done. They immediately get connected to that supervisor who posted the project. There is a real person on the other end. This is not a simulation. They will have that direct interaction. They'll be receiving resources on how to successfully work with that supervisor and other resources and best practices for just being a more independent worker, if you will. And what we find is that the students really do a great job. They rise to the occasion. We have an over 98% project success rate, meaning these are competitive, but the students rise to the occasion. They're getting a great education from your institutions. And so this is a great chance for them to put that to work. And again, if they do have a hiccup They have that point of contact at the organization, but they also have a member of our team that they are directly in touch with and can reach out to if they have questions. And we've got real folks in Chicago and in Florida, and I'm in Maryland. We got, again, folks all across the country, real people that are here and happy to help answer those questions. So why are students doing this? Well, pretty obvious for most of your students, but this checks a lot of boxes for them. It's an accessible, flexible opportunity. They can fit it into their schedule. We see students in their first or second year explore and do these as a way to kind of figure out what they want to do. We find students that come back from their junior year internship into their senior year and didn't like that experience. And maybe they use micro-internships as a way to pivot, to gain experience, to do something new so they can take their career in a different direction even before they leave their 4 or whatever years of college. We see this as a great networking opportunity for the students, resumeable experience that they can, again, put in the experience section of their resume. So a lot of benefits that, again, pretty obvious for the students. That's why we find it's pretty easy to engage the students with these opportunities. Once they hear about it, they tend to be really excited about pursuing these opportunities. And that's evident from some of the direct comments that you can read about for these students. And in case you're curious, there are additional students that you want to hear from more. Students that are implementing micro-internship, or excuse me, doing micro-internships for various reasons at various stages of their academic journey, various majors, types of institutions, et cetera. And so certainly if you're interested, you can read more directly from the source of these students who have completed micro-internships and what they've done afterwards. So I do want to address a couple of populations, though, that are particularly, face some additional barriers, starting with international students. So can international students complete micro-internships? Yes, but they do have to have the appropriate work authorization. Most of the students we find are using pre-completion OPT to complete micro-internships. CPT may be possible if the project's long enough, if it aligns with the academic timeline, et cetera. But again, we do find that flexibility of the pre-completion OPT works best for those international students. What we do is we don't want students to get in trouble. So in our kickoff welcome, congratulations message, we send them back to their school. And as you can see that red arrow pointing to where it states in our congratulations message, if you're an international student, connect with your school's international office to confirm that you can do this project. And if everything's good to go, the International Student Office will probably need some sort of documentation, and we're happy to write that letter, authorization letter that will be from Parker Dewey. We are the employer of record and we write them all the time. So happy to help provide them what they need or work directly with your International Student Office if they do have questions about this. Another population that we see a lot of questions about are undocumented students. And we do find that micro-internships tend to be a really great option for undocumented students. Yes, they can do these since they're working as independent contractors. They can even do these without DACA or having a temporary protective status, TPS. But they do have to have a valid individual taxpayer ID number or ITIN in order to complete these projects. Because yes, this is taxable income. This isn't under the table payment. And so we do want to make sure that the students have the appropriate documentation so that we can legally pay them, and they can then take that to the IRS or whoever when they're filing their taxes. So again, we do have that clearly stated in that congratulations message. And we have a separate payroll system so that does select and work with these ITIN students. So happy to answer questions about those two specific populations if you have any. But in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and now turn our attention to the companies and how it all works for them. And similar to the students, we keep it pretty simple. Post a project, pick who they want to work with, and the work gets done. Because again, behind the scenes, we're handling all of that administrative burden, paying the students, getting them into the payroll, making sure that the project's staying on track, messaging the students accordingly. But we also help with every step before that, before even picking the students. If the company, for example, isn't really sure what a good project might be, we're happy to help. And in fact, We have dozens of templates that we've seen again and again and again who are, successful micro-intern projects broken down by department. So if they are someone who works in HR or they work in marketing or what, great. There's some projects that they can see and check out in our project library. And we see, operations or popular projects, et cetera. And so if you're curious, you can go ahead and check those out. This is not a list of projects that are available right this second, but it's designed to help organizations get some ideas and to easily post those different opportunities. We also regularly set up websites similar to the one you saw earlier with Colorado State, where it's designed for you to use to engage your employers. Where in the case of Rutgers Business School, they said, hey, we love that we can share this with our students, but we also want another resource to support our employer partners. Well, micro-internships are a great solution for that. Another tool in the toolbox, if you will, as a way to engage companies. How do they post that project? Well, again, simple. If it's a templated project, a lot of the fields will pre-populate, but they can also create a project from scratch where they just need to highlight what work gets done, what the timeline is, how much their budget is, and so on. They can, as I mentioned before, say that they only want students from one or more schools. And they can also identify with specific affiliations or programs. So for example, they maybe only want to work with a student athlete. Great, they can add that as an affiliation. Or maybe they only want to work with a student veteran. Again, that is another affiliation that they can choose. Or maybe you're a nonprofit organization and you're sharing this with your students who may attend dozens of schools across the country. Great. We have nonprofit partnerships where if your students are a scholarship recipient that you're supporting, or what, they can add that organization into their profile. And we're happy to add you and your organization to our approved list. And again, no cost to that. It's just an element of partnership. So for the organizations, once they post that project, they will only see those students who applied. So if you work with students and they say, hey, I'm interested in micro-internships, great. Tell them, create a Parker Dewey profile and apply to projects, because no company will see them until they apply. We are not a resume database. That's a pretty big difference from how our platform works versus a lot of other job boards by design, because students don't want to hear from companies if they're not interested in projects. We are very sensitive about over-emailing students. We don't send a lot of emails to students because students have told us that they're inundated already. But similarly, we don't want to have companies seeing students who may not be interested in their project. Why? Well, not only is that a violation of that student's privacy, potentially, but it also gives companies a false sense of who is actually interested and available in that project. So they'll only see the students who applied. They'll see the profiles that the students have created. They'll see if the student uploaded their resume or included a LinkedIn profile. Great. They'll see all of that. And then they can also see how the student answered those short answer application questions, because those are key. As you saw before, that's the primary way that a company decides who to pick. So once they've made their decision, again, the work gets done. They directly get in touch with the student and they can work together from there. And so for companies, we find that this is a really easy way for them to engage students. They tend to get lots and lots of applicants for every project. It's a very low cost and low commitment way to vet talent. And so we find that companies are far less risk averse. For companies, this becomes a bit, or as one early micro-intern put it, it's kind of like dating, where they can try lots of different projects. And similarly, the companies can work with lots of different students before having to make that bigger term commitment of who to hire for that internship or that full-time role. And so it's a bit of a, not a great analogy, but that dating analogy works well. It's not designed to replace anything that's longer term, but a great way for them to get to know in a meaningful way these students that otherwise could have been passed over. And for companies that are interested in building a pipeline to increasing their brand awareness on campus, who are interested in reaching populations that are just not coming to their table at the career fair or who are not applying to their jobs, tell them a little bit about this, because this can be a really great way for them to find talent that otherwise would have been untapped. We're also seeing some really interesting use cases for alumni or local employers, those who really have an affinity for your institution, but maybe don't have the budget to donate thousands upon thousands to your alumni office. So this is a really great way where for a few $100s, most of which goes into the pockets of the students, they can work directly with the student, get something off of their to-do list, and have that mentorship opportunity that's a really enhanced experience for that student because they're connecting on a real world project. It's mentorship on steroids, as I like to say, because it's a great way for them to have something to talk about and have that student to have that tangible experience they can add to their resume. And if you're interested in learning more about what these companies are experiencing and how they're using micro-internships for various recruiting purposes, again, I'll share with you this list of success stories of some of the organizations who have not only hired micro-interns, but have spoken publicly about their experience. And this is also a one-pager that you certainly can share with organizations that you might be in contact with. And then similarly, we also have flyers where you can see where does a micro-internship fit into that larger conversation, where if a company says, I'm really looking to build a more diverse talent pool, well, great. Here's how micro-internships can help. And most importantly, here's what the students had to say about that experience. And by the way, if this particular flyer would be helpful, we all linked to it directly here as a PDF. And so you can certainly check this out at your leisure if that would be helpful. But you'll also have access to our toolkit where you can open up the exact same flyer in Canva, and you can then customize this accordingly with your logo, your colors, and a link to a Parker Dewey landing page if you have one, etc. And so try to make this very easy for you all because we recognize nobody has extra time when it comes to building more marketing materials. I also want to highlight some data points because I know how data-centric higher education institutions are, rightfully so. And so what is the impact of a micro-internship? Well, what we see, this is using data from NACE, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and other sources, is that the payment for students who are doing paid internships, particularly students from underrepresented background, it's 26% of those students are doing paid internships. Pretty sad, just to put it mildly. However, what we've seen with micro-internships is that, again, 100% are paid, but that over 80% of the time, the students who are selected come from backgrounds that are historically underrepresented in the workforce. And we are super proud of that statistic. However, we're doing nothing to impact it in the sense that it's not us who are picking the students. The students are applying, they're opting in, and they're the ones who are getting selected. And they're doing a great job on these projects. And so that's all happening organically because this model is accessible to students. They can fit it into their schedule, no matter what else they may have on their to-do list. We're seeing that this is accessible, that students who are international or who are undocumented that may not have other options to do paid experience, they can often do micro-internships. And those who are doing micro-internships, what happened to them afterwards? Well, we're finding that 55% of the time the students are recent grads, they don't tend to stay at their current employer, but that's not the case with the micro-interns. Less than 2% of the time are they leaving that employer within a year. So that first year retention is massive. And we see that also they're more likely to be employed. So great statistics just showing the efficacy. And this is, again, across the board for students who are completing these projects. And then from the students' perspective, they're also saying that it's valuable. And this is based on the NACE career readiness competencies. They're saying that by and large, they're improving either a little or a lot after completing these short 10, 20, 30, 40-hour projects. But even if they're not improving, the one that I get most excited about is that no change, but I built confidence. How many times have we worked with students who have come into our office and felt, the imposter syndrome is running rampant in their mind, that they just don't feel like they can do whatever sort of experiential education opportunity that you're telling them to do. With micro-internships, it's that stepping stone that builds that confidence for them so that they can hopefully go from micro-intern to maybe additional micro-interns, maybe intern full-time, whatever, but that stepping stone that helps them recognize that they can add value to those organizations, so they can successfully complete these projects and launch their career. So we love seeing this kind of data. So now let's talk a little bit about you and how you can bring micro-internships to your students and potentially other stakeholders. What does partnership look like? Well, as a reminder, this is at no cost to your institution. And it's also something that happens really, really quickly if you wish. So we have had schools or nonprofits attend this webinar and become a partner tomorrow. So that is completely realistic if that's something that is in line with your goals. How do we begin? Well, we set up a landing page for your students and or employer partners. We have a generic version of this page, but I will also share with you for your students, for example, we'll put your logo, we'll highlight how it all works for them, give them some access to some resources, some FAQs. Again, we build all of this for you. All that we need is whatever logo you want to use, some colors. If you want to swap out this photo with photos of your campus or students, great, that's all we need. And then similarly, we also have a employer version of the exact same page where it's the exact same information, but for employers, so that students and employers aren't getting confused of what should I read, what information is relevant to me, etc. And so we have, again, how it all works if you're a company. And then for companies, here are some examples of projects that they can start with that can give them some ideas. The biggest question we get from companies is, okay, this sounds good, but what's an example of a project that a student could do in 10 or 20 hours? Well, here are some examples that they can post right there, right as soon as they're ready to go. And again, we have resources, including a webinar demonstration for either students or companies if they just want to hear straight from Parker Dewey how it works if they're a student or an employee. Great, we do those on a monthly basis. Everyone is welcome. You're welcome to share those with your students or employer partners as well. Now, other benefits of partnership is access to our marketing collateral. So as I briefly demonstrated, we have collateral for all of the different stakeholders that you might be interested in, a wide variety of types of collateral. It even is categorized based on different topics. And so, for example, let's say you are responsible for your school's social media account. Great. But what do you say once the career fair and other events have done? Well, here is access to student-focused social media, and there's a ton of topics that you can choose as much or little as you like. And here's a caption, here's a suggested link, an image, etc. Use what you like, change what you don't like, but it's all there to make your life easier. Similarly, maybe you are employer-facing and you have a walk-in employer coming in, or you're on the phone with an organization who says, you know what, I really am interested in connecting with your students, but I don't have a full-time job or an internship. Maybe you just want to send them a quick flyer with a blurb about what micro-internships are. Well, depending on how your conversation went, they might be interested in a hiring use case. Great. Here's a PDF that you can download right there. Or if you have a few extra minutes, you can download it via Canva. Similarly, maybe they are just interested in that short-term project help. And again, PDF or a Canva version of the same flyer. So we want to make this easy for you, recognizing that, again, nobody has extra time. Other benefits of partnership is our team. My colleagues and I are always happy to brainstorm with you to understand what are your strategic goals, initiatives, and where might micro-internships fit in. For example, we're seeing schools that say, you know what, I have experiential learning budgets and I want to support as many students as possible. Well, we're seeing schools that are taking a portion of that micro-internship budget, that internship budget, and saying, I want it to support as many students. I'm going to break it into smaller micro-internships where the students can still get that paid experience, but they can also, it supports more students. And maybe you can engage alumni, those local businesses, nonprofits, etc. We're here and happy and love supporting programs like that. And then lastly, access to data. Now, right now, this data is available where you can let us know when you're interested in the reports of your students, who they worked with, etc. And we'll provide that information to you up to 4 times per year. We are building out a feature where you certainly can access this on demand, and it'll be other functionality that's going to be released sometime this summer. It is going to be a subscription-based model, so more to come on that, but this no-cost option is certainly going to be available as well, so that you still have access. But if you are interested in something more on demand, that's why we're building out that feature our university partners have said that would be helpful. So we're responding to that request. So I want to close with some ideas, some brainstorming, how you can help your students succeed. Because I'm going to make the assumption that if you're interested in micro-internships, you want to support students. That tends to be the universal truth. However, the best way you can support your students is by also sharing micro-internships with your other stakeholders, whether that be alumni, employer partners, that local community. We have one program, for example, where they are focused on educating students in careers and nonprofits and public service. Great. Maybe you have a grant, or you have a team, or you've received a grant and you're interested in how can I support those students as effectively as possible, especially certain populations of students. Or maybe you have projects of your own, different opportunities. So there's case studies for every single one of these use cases that you are welcome to dive into. I'm just going to highlight a couple of these just for a quick example. So in the case of engaging alumni, Swarthmore College reached out to us about a year after they created their own micro-internship program. They, like many schools, created a micro-internship program in the early COVID days. They ran it themselves for 9 months or so. And then they said, you know what, we love this program, but we want to see it grow, and it's a lot of work. So we've run it ever since. And for the last almost 3 years, we've powered what they call the SWATworks program. Now, about a year or so ago, they decided to restructure the program. And so this is their alumni focused page. They're going to their alumni and saying, hey, do you want to work with our students? Great. We'll pay for it. These are what the students will receive. Parker Dewey pays the students from money that comes, in this case, from Swarthmore. But they also, as in the Swarthmore program, decided that they wanted to just focus it on 2 times a year. So winter break and then summer break. And so when designing the program, when they changed about a year or so ago to focusing just on those 2 times a year, they have a specific timeline where they tell the students and the employers to engage, and they've seen even stronger engagement than when they ran it all year round. The other thing that we build out for them as part of their program is an impact report, so that it can measure all of those data points that the school is interested in order to effectively determine, is this a program adding the value and hitting the marks and the KPIs that they want. And so Swarthmore, again, they gave us permission to share this report, and this summarizes the program. It highlights the demographics of the students who have engaged and been selected in the micro-internships. They were really interested in understanding the industry, the types of organizations, and so on. So we add that information into their report. These impact reports are customizable to match what the school is looking for, the types of organizations, and so on. And then lastly, we also provide the feedback that the students have received so that they can understand, okay, our students did really, really well in things like, timeliness and and quality, et cetera, but maybe their presentation and communication skills could be a bit stronger. And so they, again, can take action based on that real world feedback from these organizations. Another example is Florida A&M University, and they've benefited from a grant that has really supported their students, and thus far received over $160,000 for completing micro-internships, which is truly unbelievable. But it's believable because I just ran the reports yesterday. And they've had over 500 students, over 500 different projects that the students have completed since 2023. It's just, again, just massive uptick. But the reason they've been so successful is that they've engaged not only their students, but their employer network. All Florida and Connecticut schools could have benefited from this grant, and certainly have, but FAMU has taken it to a whole nother level by really transparently saying, hey, if you want to hire students at FAMU, you have essentially 2 options. Full-time jobs or internships, great, we're a Handshake school, post it on Handshake. But if you're looking for a new and innovative way, this is their employer-facing page. Side by side with Handshake, they're promoting micro-internships. So just to give you one quick illustration. They also are regularly communicating with both students and employers about how they can get started on micro-internships. The students, they use Instagram extensively to highlight, here's other FAMU students who have completed micro-internships and what they said about it. For their employers, they send out that image that you see in the center of the slide. They sent that out about 8 or so months ago when this data was correct. It's outdated because it's only grown ever since. But that went to every single one of their employer partners in their Handshake database. And these employers have responded en masse. So there's a lot of other different types of examples. If you're interested in small business testimonials, if you're interested in populations that are historically underrepresented. Again, there's programs like this, which is a grant-funded program. This is a statewide micro-internship program. This is the one I alluded to before, where it's focused on nonprofits and government. George Washington University was initially started off as a grant and now is supported through alumni donations. And University of California, Irvine, they had students run social media for their annual giving day, and that resulted in the strongest giving that they've ever had on record. So just to give you a few highlights, you can certainly check out those programs in greater detail if that's helpful to you. But just to wrap up, I want to highlight how Parker Dewey supports programs like those, because there is a whole programmatic element and arm that we're certainly happy and honored to power these various types of programs. And just to talk through what that entails, first and foremost, is we'll build out a portal specific to your program with the appropriate branding, highlighting specific projects, again, logos and appropriate marketing materials. In the case of that startup example, for instance, that's an example with San Jose State University's Entrepreneur Center. And so it can be a subset of your other institution's goals. Once we have that set up, we'll provide you with the appropriate marketing materials so that you can share that program with the audience that you're interested in, and whether that be specific resources within our toolkit or custom collateral, depending on the needs and goals of your program. But the biggest area where we can help is that day-to-day, so that this program can be turn it on and you don't have to worry about it, because we again recognize that a lot of schools and organizations, they love the idea of providing more opportunities to their students, but how do you do it when you only have so many different resources and team members to help? Well, that's where we can help. We'll handle all of that back and forth with the students, with the companies, make sure that those projects meet whatever sort of specific criteria it needs to meet. Maybe it needs to be a type of project that's only available to liberal arts students. Maybe it needs to be only 20 hours where the students are paid $400 or whatever. We'll make sure that all of those things are happening, again, so you don't need to think about any of those things behind the scenes. And we'll also share all that data with you. So we have dashboards that are shared with the appropriate contacts at the partner schools or organizations, and they're tracking whatever KPIs are relevant to you. Maybe you're interested in what academic year the students who are participating are from. Great. One I kicked off yesterday, this was an organization that's supporting students at dozens of schools, and they wanted to know how many students from each school was engaging. Great. So we'll, again, share all that information with you so that you can get a sense of how much of the budget has been used, how many students have participated, and so on. And then we'll aggregate at the end of the program all of the KPIs into a report that's comprehensive, similar to what you saw with the Swarthmore example. And you can check out some additional examples of impact reports later on if you get those, when you get those slides. And so if you are interested, we are going to be doing a webinar giving more in-depth information about how these funded programs work. That's going to be taking place in a couple of months, but happy to have a conversation before then if you have an idea in mind, or if you just are wanting to brainstorm what this potentially could look like and how we potentially could make this easy for you, whether that be for this summer or something that you would want to launch in the fall. Speaking of other events coming up, so we do have a few different webinars, as I briefly mentioned, that are regularly scheduled. So the first two are for your students. We have a webinar each month, and then also open office hours each month designed for students, led by our team, open to any student that would be interested. For the webinars, they are recorded. We'll send them to the students who register. They can also check out the most recent recording. So if this particular date and time doesn't work in their schedule, no problem. They can check out the recording and slides from the most recent iteration of that particular session. For the office hours, similar to any other office hours, we again host it regularly, but it is not recorded. And that's just to ensure transparency and confidentiality for the students for whatever questions that they may have on that's top of mind. We regularly see students who will say, sure, you can open up show my Parker Dewey profile and we'll walk through ways that they can improve, just to give you one specific example. And then we also host a webinar each month for employers, and you're welcome to and encouraged to invite any organizations that you're working with who may want to learn more about micro-internships. So this particular session is this Thursday. However, they also can check out the recording and the slides if they're interested in learning a little bit more in advance. So what's next? Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes of your day to hear more about this. But I would also encourage you to think through where this might fit in for you. And so there's, as you've seen, a lot of different directions that micro-internships can take. And so just to give you one last quick poll question, I'm going to ask for those of you to take a few minutes and as you thought through some of these ideas, where might micro-internships fit in given your specific goals? Are you interested in sharing it with students, with alumni, with your recruiter or employer partners? Maybe you're interested in a sponsorship initiative or helping support local organizations or nonprofits. For any of these ideas, always happy to have an additional conversation or brainstorm session with you if that could be of use to you. I'm going to put my direct email in the chat. So if you can't wait, want to send a quick email, happy to chat with you later on, and we can certainly take your questions offline. But with that, 3 minutes ahead of schedule. But if you do have any questions, more than happy to stick around and answer those real time. But if not, again, I wish you all the best for the rest of your spring semester. And thank you so much for taking a few minutes and for your interest. And don't be a stranger if we can help in any way.